what I love is at the end of this work, once we unravel those patterns and we land, really the work is just to land in our true nature. And when you do that and when you unravel that, your voice quality changes. It's not just the metaphoric voice, right? I have a voice, I deserve to speak, or I have something to say. It's like your actual voice, the tonality, the richness, the safety, the way that others respond to your voice with trust, and it's just the quality changes.
Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience podcast. My name is Keith Fifeson. On this show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Callie B Elwaynes. She's the founder and the curator of Bold and Visible, a platform, a transformational platform, and a curated space for women whose mission depends on getting their ideas across with massive impact. Callie is a woman with incredible sincerity and impact. She's created this process, the Somatic Transformation Story Method, and it's a very powerful step-by-step process. It's applied in neuroscience and research around trauma and somatic education, integral theory, as well as change leadership. We discuss trauma, the ability to find your voice, your own story, and Callie has spent a decade leading the Calgary Regional Partnership, a dynamic consortium of cities and rural municipalities. Anyway, I totally enjoyed my conversation with Callie. I was inspired and lifted up by it, and I look forward to more of her work to spread the word and truly change lives. I hope you enjoy the conversation and enjoy the show. Hey, Callie B Elwaynes. I am so privileged to have you here. What is going on, Callie?
Hi, I'm great.
What's up?
Grateful to be here. So grateful to be here. Yeah, it's awesome. It's September, right? We're moving. We're
oh my goodness, yeah.
In a new time.
Isn't it going on really quickly? I feel like suddenly September hits and everybody has their schedule full. It's sort of like, okay, time to speed up. But you are you're doing some really incredible things, and I'm so privileged to have you here on the show. I'm so privileged to have you talk about your work, which is really helping individuals to show up and to be present for all of the things that are going on in their lives, as well as perhaps some things that they might have buried a bit. Can you tell me, what is the bold and visible experience? What is that? And more importantly, why? Why bold and visible?
Yeah, Keith, I love the question why. Let's start with that one because right now, I know that you know this and everyone listening probably feels this too, we're absolutely in new territory. Everything is changing, everything is shifting in the world around us, and there's never been a more important moment when we can step forward with our gifts and talents and the things that we're here to bring to life. We're here to shape the solutions going forward. And so Bold and Visible is a platform. I work mostly with women to help women step into their authentic self-expression and larger impact, to release the blocks holding them back from that larger thing, right? To take the larger risks because we are in a new time and we need their voice and their solutions. And there's a whole uplifting consciousness opportunity here, opportunity.
Yeah, and I am all for women being empowered to go ahead and show up and speak up. So when you start talking about that, it's time, there's a shift. What's underlying that? Why do you feel that there is a shift there? I mean, what is it, that you're trying to bring out? I mean, women have had a voice for a long time, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that globally, like for everyone, men and women, there's a shift happening right now. I'm feeling and that, as the old structures are falling away, the outdated structures, we're all being gifted with the opportunity to step onto the stage of our life and to give of ourselves. But, there's been a historical holding back of our voice. And, it's really, we've all been acknowledging the structures and the systems that are at play that have influenced us, but where I'm finding, and for myself, my own story in my life and why I do what I do, is that the biggest block is right here. You know, it's
inside you're in
inside of us, and the freedom and the safety to come forward with our gifts is right here too. So this is the space I work is with, this place of where we're able to take 100% responsibility and responsibility really to give our gifts in the world, and that requires us to take a look at ourselves with deep compassion, but also with deep courage to take that last little step that, you know, because so many people I'm working with are incredibly brilliant, accomplished, deeply spiritual, deeply connected people, and yet still longing for something that's greater than they are, right? So this is...
Yeah. You know, I love the fact that you're working primarily with women, even though men have a real need. Specifically, we had talked about this, and we had a little bit of a conversation beforehand about trauma, right? You know, and if we start taking a look at PTSD and trauma, women have the largest share of that, without question. Men have it. A lot of it is submerged, and a lot of it comes out through the veterans like I work with vets. So, but women have systemic trauma. I mean, it's generational trauma. And, you know, when I started out, I said, come on, women have had a voice. I was being a bit facetious about that, because I definitely do believe that women have the power to heal. They have the power to give birth. They have the power to go ahead and change the world and heal the world in a very big way. So is that part of the ethos? Is that part of your sort of why? And, you know, and how do you go about doing that with women? How does that happen?
Definitely, it's definitely the foundation of the why, for sure, and so well said. You know, women do have a voice. I know that sounds wrong in some ways when I say it, right? Because we have this cultural notion that we don't, but actually it sits within our body. And you're right, we have been unsafe for generations. It's epigenetic trauma that's in our body. It's, you know, intergenerational, it's cultural. But there's also a space now where we've come through so much already. That people, and I loved when we did our little meditation in advance of this, because you connected us to all those generations that came before us, and all the support we've had. You know, we've worked really hard to get a voice, but the last place for us to work with is inside of those trauma patterns in our body. And it's so interesting. We all have them, men and women, small stressors, large stressors. And for me, it's really about building safety, somatic safety, inner safety, not to stay safe, but to be able to take the risks to step out of that, out of our comfort zone, into the space where we're really being called. You know, we're being called to something larger. And it's actually kind of painful to stay, you know, back in the contracted space where we're almost fully given, right? And it's so interesting, because when men come out and to the work that I do in the world, they're always asking, do you have this for men? We need it too. I think it's actually it's a human condition. And I work with women though, because we have a specific form of lack of safety that stops us from really saying what we're here to say. And we often look outwards and blame the conditions around us without being able to look to the source lovingly and you know, without blame.
You're reminding me of a lot of the work that I do, certainly from a mindfulness viewpoint, breathing and helping individuals to get in touch with their parts. You know, Dick Schwartz, looking at IFS, internal family systems, and understanding what the work he does is really around understanding the various parts of our psyche, of our personality, whether or not it's the protector, whether or not it's the firefighter, whether or not it's, you know, the part of ourselves that has been exiled. You know, there are different parts of ourselves. And I'm wondering, within the work that you're doing, because, you know, we came here to discuss how do people, you know, bring together and start to befriend and invite into the discussion those various parts of themselves that might have been exiled or might have been that they're quieting down. But it's really that powerful part of themselves. And I find working with women that often they become very mousy and they don't necessarily get in touch with that power. I call it the Callie energy, that powerful energy that's in charge of life and death, and is able to go ahead and bring that to the table. So in the work that you do, how do you, I understand you're doing some somatic work, you're doing some presence work. How do you wind up doing some of that stuff?
Yeah, well, so my method is called the Somatic Transformational Story Method. And it really is a fully integrative pathway where we really do start to identify, name, call that part of us really close to us, recognize inside of our body, as you just mentioned, how hard this part of us has been working to keep us safe, and even recognizing its patterns and its reflexive ways it shows up in the world. Oftentimes as women, we'll beat ourselves up for that. Instead, we're starting to fall in love with and understand its deep purpose, its wisdom, all the gifts it's given us. But we also start to wake up to what it's doing in our body, our breath, our nervous system, how it shows up in the world, and affects not only how we perceive the world, but how the world responds to us. And so it is a befriending and a deep maitria, a deep level of compassion to bring.
So is there breathing in this process, or writing, or what?
Absolutely. So we work mostly with the body here. It's very experiential. So I literally have a set of floor work where we work with our full system, our nervous system, our spine, our breath. We use voice and movement inside of our work. I have a part of our work is in story. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a moment. But we use voice coaching to really access the parts of our voice that have actually been stuck in a contraction in our nervous system. So we need to unwind the body. We start with letting go of those, the wiring, the neurobiology, and the contractions that we're holding without even knowing it, right? It changes our posture. So yes, we work with a very specific somatic process, which includes breath, posture, movement, work on the floor, contemplative work that goes with it to start noticing how in our life, I talk about it like red light, green light in a very, in a big bucket. But forced stress overextension is in this sort of green light drive to always keep going, or everything's going to fall apart. Our endocrine system crashes, right? We get exhausted and depleted and disconnected. And many of us have a deep contraction, which is like a frozen, immobilized space inside of our nervous system, and trauma patterns where we're not fully giving ourselves in the world. Or we're foot on the gas, foot on the brake, and never really moving forward.
So it sounds like, from the standpoint of trauma, I mean, when we're starting to talk about Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory, as well as vagal tone, and really understanding the vagus nerve, you're using sound, you're using touch, you're using movement, and when you get to sound, are you sort of hitting the overall range? Are you kind of exploring that in terms of, like, where is that inside the body for the individual? Because, trauma has different sounds. Even, childhood sounds may sound very different than, like subsumed rage, right?
Yeah, we do a very deep exploration of voice within the body. We're always pointing. So that's something we do in our work, is we always have a path to point us towards. So whatever you're working with, whatever the block is you're working with, we're going to find what's hidden underneath that, where your voice is. So we, it's funny because I just had a big stage event. We have a transformational TED style stage for women to get onto as a threshold.
Your videos, by the way, your videos are outstanding. I mean, and the work that I've done some viewing. I haven't viewed all of your videos, but I've certainly seen what you do, and you're very, very, very talented. I mean, in terms of the people that are there and what you bring out, perhaps. But go ahead. I'm sorry. You just had an event. You just had an event in July, or?
Correct. Yeah, the bold and visible monologues is we were able for the first time in a few years, of course, to be on our live stage again and
Right.
fill a theater
Fantastic.
full of people. So, but you back to what you were mentioning about the voice and use of the voice. You know, we have the opportunity in my work to bring the women at the end of their program into a physical, embodied voice rehearsal and stage rehearsal, and so we sound so interesting and strange that we said we're gonna, you know, create a T-shirt that says "Bold and Visible, we're not a cult." Just because of the sounds that are coming out of the rehearsal space are so, you know, interesting. But really, what I love is at the end of this work, once we unravel those patterns and we land, really the work is just to land in our true nature. And when you do that and when you unravel that, your voice quality changes. It's not just the metaphoric voice, right? Of I have a voice, I deserve to speak, or I have something to say. It's like your actual voice, the tonality, the richness, the safety, the way that others respond to your voice with trust, and it's just the quality changes.
And is that you think that's sort of like a kind of like a welcome home kind of, you know, kind of moment? Is that kind of 100%. It feels that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I talk about it like a threshold. Many of us don't even know what our voice sounds like without the force or contraction or needing something from the world or trying to protect ourselves. We just have never heard it. I felt it and been in connection to it. So interesting how relationships open up after that, because when you're speaking from that center of who you are, you're undeniable. You just you are who you are.
Right. So, you know, I can't help but kind of go back to this whole idea of a patriarchal versus a matriarchal society, and perhaps you know, the epigenetic or the you know, systemic subjugation or putting down of women into a position of, you know, I mean, even you're in Canada, right? And
correct, yeah.
Yeah, right. And in the U.S., I mean, women still, the Equal Rights Amendment has still not been ratified. We've got actually, you know, choice being moved back to where it was. I mean, there's a lot of things that really, I think, help to put women in a little girl kind of way. And I'm just wondering, when you do your work with women or you do your work with men, when you talk about finding their voice, often is it different for women than it might be for men? And what does that, I know one size doesn't fit all here, but what does that voice sound like? I mean, is it a voice of power? Is it a voice of compassion and softness and kindness? I'm just wondering, is there, you know, in your view, often, what do you see?
Oh, I love that question, because this is where it applies into life, right? When you're in the boardroom or when you're, you know, out there trying to accomplish your work in the world or engage, you know, and you're right, we've been so influenced and so affected in our body by all these larger systems, you know, but when we find our voice, it's neither forceful and demanding nor diminutive. It takes up rightful space without repelling others or demanding anything. But because we are standing in such sovereignty and fullness, it's compelling. It's absolutely influencing. Others listen to it because it's not so I always say the work for me with women isn't about I demand, I have the right to speak. It doesn't come from anger. It comes from a great center of awareness, love, and compassion, but it takes a stand. It's like inside of being fully aware of your birthright to speak and be here, in spite of all the systems and all of the other stuff. We're not looking to have that, you know, to change that before we speak. And when we're safe, we can take this larger, and it's for men too. I would say it's the same, actually, right? You know, and men have a right to speak. The masculine needs to be here in the world. right? We need the masculine.
Right, for sure.
I absolutely, like yes, I work mostly with women. That's because I'm a woman, and I'm deeply aware of the specific issues. But to have a masculine voice it takes up space without demeaning and forcing others, even in its tone and its presence. It includes so a voice that's in sovereignty includes everyone, but doesn't exclude yourself. For women, often we'll exclude ourselves and include everyone else. And it's this loop of awareness. It brings us all together. It's powerful.
I really like, you've used, Kelly, you've used the word sovereignty a couple of times, and it reminds me of the work I do around, archetypal work. And, before we had the chance to really have this time and talk, we talked about the hero's journey and the archetype, the life archetype. I read in your bio that you were at one point, you were homeless. And you had, as a younger woman, you had challenges that you had to deal with. And it sounded to me very much like that you've been on this hero's or heroine's journey. And in some way, it sounds to me like you're doing that work now. You're helping individuals to go on their own journey to reconfigure, to defrag, to reconfigure themselves and their stories, so that they have a real clear narrative in terms of who they are, where they are, and maybe where they want to go. Can you speak to that in terms of, this area of sovereignty? Because I like that it brings in, and I'll bring out another quote that you used recently, but not now, but it brings in the responsibility that people have for their stories and for their lives themselves, rather than trying to exile parts of themselves again. So can you talk to some of that stuff, including maybe how your own journey might have brought you to where you are?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so grateful for that journey, however painful at times it might have been. Like you said, I was a young teenager. I was homeless on the street for 4 years because of my home that had mental health issues. That's often what you'll see is predicated by young people being on the street. I knew I had a purpose, though. I've always been that person that felt I had something larger to do, something to contribute. And I had already been doing that as a young person, even as a kid. But yeah, inside of all that breakdown, it was a journey, was a hero's journey, really, my heroine's journey to pick up the sword and make choices and learn how to fundamentally move forward in life and be present and forgive. And I do bring that into my work 100%. And when you're talking about story and our responsibility and our ability to shift our narrative, for me, when you say that, it's so rich because it's more than just the intellectual narrative or how we see ourselves. It's really like we have the ability to author a new story that releases old traumas, that frees us from embodied patterns of shame, blame, doubt that hold us back from all we can be. And that's, it is an actual somatic story. Like, I believe that, our stories are showing up in our body every day through our life, whether we know it or not. And so it is this deep recalibration and reintegration of who we really are. And that ends in a narrative shift, which is an intellectual and a change of our way we see ourselves, but it's also a shift in our body and our relationship to our past. And so reauthoring is more than just because we work on paper, right? Like we at the end of we craft, but through the crafting of our story, we actually are releasing the old story from our body, so it no longer exists there. And yet that exiled part is with us and integrated into today's world and able to be, like you said earlier, Keith, that part that really enlivens us. We haven't had that before. So I believe we can all author a new story.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that by coming to terms with who, the what, the where, the when, the how, the why, the narrative, if you will, within the arc of our lives in terms of the past, the present, and the future, but more so from the past, where a lot of the somatic, a lot of that trauma really is embodied. We're able to, I think Peter Levine or Levine talks about it in terms of shake it off, like, why, being able to really shake off the trauma, and you're using
Yeah.
the work, the body work and the somatic work to go ahead and help people to get that, and maybe from a psychodrama viewpoint be able to go ahead and come to terms with what it was and provide some emotional literacy to it, so that they can say, okay, I got that. That's, I don't have to hold on to it anymore. I can release it, and then I can rewrite. I like that, rewrite the story in a way that really helps them to say, okay, that's, now it's time to go ahead and be the whole person that I am, accepting and whole, rather than sort of fragmented and shameful.
Beautiful. I love that, how you summarize that, and I really feel like it's metabolizing. And when you talk about being this whole person, it's finally we're safe to let the whole of ourselves be seen and heard. And it's not forceful. It's not, we're not apologizing for ourselves. It's just this natural, comfortable in our own skin. That's why I use a physical stage as a threshold. Multiple reasons, of course. Story has so many powerful reasons. The women that I work with end up using this story in their business. They use it in their life, and it serves others, right? Because others listen from autobiographically. They hear their own story, and it's actually quite freeing. But when they get on stage and they share the story from the other side of their trauma, right? It's never a trauma story. That sharing, that standing in it and letting all of themselves be seen, that threshold just locks in. It's like a recalibrating of who they are.
Right. It's turning the switch on and saying, okay, we're on with this, and I'm good with this. I don't have to hide my light under the bush. Let's go ahead and use this as the power source to go ahead and shine out who we are.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're talking about a lot of the people who come through my work are already super accomplished people who actually get on stages, who run companies. It's not,
Right.
It's this last little bit though that a lot of us women have that we're holding back. And I'm here to be all of myself.
Yeah. My mom had years ago said that we plant gardens with manure. We throw manure to go ahead and plant gardens. So we've got to make sure we have some rich manure and some good seeds to go ahead and then feed the seeds to go ahead and grow what it is that we want. But we can't hide that, right? Because then it comes out sideways, which is really, I think, part of the problem that we see in a lot of our society, that it's either it's either black or white, right? You're either good or you're bad, and we don't own or embody a lot of the imperfections that really make us human. And we want our leaders to be perfect, and they're certainly not perfect, and some are worse than not perfect. But
it's interesting though, isn't it, that you don't necessarily trust those that show up perfect?
Right.
Like, we have a human propensity to want to see some vulnerability, to want to see some truth.
Right.
And perfection doesn't compel anyone.
No. It says there's nowhere to meet them. I mean, there's nothing to hold on to kind of say, okay, yeah, I see the cracks and crevices, but this is someone who's done work. This is someone who's really owned their stuff. They own their, so they own their crap. Their manure.
Exactly. We talk a lot about, turning our struggles or our manure into art and living in a sense of wholeness where we're those shadow parts of us, they're not shamed, they're not hidden, they're not stuck in us anymore. And we can talk about it in a way that's generative and
Right.
helping others.
So I want to ask you a question. Why you in one of the articles that I read, you talked about compassion and you talked about agency. All right. So I want to get your sense in terms of why compassion and agency, and you say is the only way. So can you talk to that for a minute or two?
Yeah, you bet. We have to start by taking 100% responsibility for owning our voice, for making the changes we're making in our life. But what's the key to that is not going into a space of blame. We've been in blame for so many years. We've been in shame, hidden patterns of shame. And so in order to take responsibility, to really step forward, we really need to cultivate a deep, deep awareness and a deep compassion for all those parts of us that have gone into those reflexive, unconscious reactions that are stress and trauma based. So if we hope to take 100% responsibility and to step forward and not to be looking outward for the source, but to look inward, we can't take 100% responsibility without also marrying that with a deep sense of mastery and self-compassion and understanding, because we've been inside of these blame and shame patterns for way too long, and that's not going to work. We tend to want to look out at the culture and everywhere else for the source and the reasons, and sure, that influences us, but the place we can change is here. And so we can't stand for ourselves and be willing to do the courageous work to look inward and source the change from within if we don't do that with the deepest level of understanding and the deepest level of mastery for who we are, our suffering, our challenges, and what we've been through.
That's beautiful. So really, compassion in a number of ways allows us to look at from all sides, whatever our story is, who the players are. I mean, in a lot of cases, I think where people get caught up on is, the victim versus the victor. They get caught up in the victimhood of somehow their parents weren't perfect enough, or the situation, somebody took advantage of me, or whatever. And really all they were trying to do was survive, right? All they were trying to do was to go ahead and do the best that they possibly could, but then they get caught up in the shame blame game. And that's and I think, to your point, the compassion and the agency allows them to really take a look at that in a caring, kind, compassionate way, and maybe re-examine their story, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would not have been able to make it off the street as a young person. Most of my friends did not. Had I been looking outward, there were so many ways I could have blamed the system, my parents, the policing, the social working system. I fell through the cracks. I could have held that in my body my whole life.
Right.
But somehow I knew it was within, I had to take the steps and also understand the complexity of everything and forgive those people.
Well, that's that's big, because it really then brings you into the moment in terms of what can you do and how can you take charge, how can you be the change you wish to see in the world.
Right.
So I know we're coming off to the end of our time here, and I want to be mindful of that. And I do have one other question that I want to bring towards the end here. It may not be the best question to end with, but I think it's a mindful question. And maybe if you can talk about it in terms of mindful experience, or what mindfulness might have to do with it, I think that might be important. One of the things that I read that you mentioned, and you had talked about this, is the whole idea of the importance of near-death experiences, or NDEs as they're called. And I want to understand that because, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I've certainly have had that moment where, you think about death and you think about why am I here, and so on and so forth. So there are these wake-up moments where maybe someone around you has died, or someone near you and dear to you. But tell me, why did you put that in there, and why is that important to you? And how is that, how does that play in terms of us maybe showing up in a mindful way?
Oh, I love that question. um, if you hear my story, you'll hear that I had some serious effects. I had a double lung surgery. When I was on the street, I was in so much stress that my lungs were collapsing. So I actually had the great gift of having several near-death experiences. And inside of those experiences you're truly, truly going into the luminous space where, Callie wasn't Callie with a name and a personality, but I had this unboundness about me where there was a sense of a knower, very dispersed back in the background, who was part of everything, Keith, from the beginning of the beginnings to the end of the end. It was like this deep field of love and safety and fundamental, there's so many names for it, the groundless space. And this just brought to me the reality that our true nature and what we're connected to, who we really are, is connected to love. When you come back from something like that, and we're taking all this stuff in the world and our life so seriously, and we go into survival patterns, and I can just breathe in and breathe into the connection to life and realize life is actually here to support me. It's this letting go of the attachment to everything being perfect, letting go of attachment to this idea of myself as Callie in a certain way. It's helped me to open up a lot more spaciousness and love and rest, inside of that cycle of survival all the time. And just this hopefulness, just a beautiful hopefulness that all of us, every one of us on this planet is connected to that field. We are that. There really isn't any language to describe it. And in fact, there was no language in the space that I was being brought back by paramedics and, but there's no language to describe it, and there is no language there. It's just this beingness that we all are. And to have touched that is it's a profound gift for me, and I would never change having had those experiences.
So I think that's beautiful. And, we're so spoiled in a lot of the Western world in terms of not having to forage or hunt or, deal with our day-to-day survival instincts. And I was reading recently that a Harvard study really showed that looking at only having one meal a day activates this part of our longevity that really allows us to live longer, so it's actually, being able to, and it's sort of, it's not starving ourselves, but being able to go ahead and fast, intermittent fasting. And this whole idea of just having this sense of life is not, life isn't forever. And, what am I going to do today? And how am I going to be my best self now, in this sacred moment, in this time that we have? And it sounds like you got that gift, certainly during that period of time, and you've held on to it as a part of your true nature rather than a part of the ego or part of this, artifice of what you do or how much you make or whatever,
Yeah, it's a true gift. And I'm practice, and I continue to practice the Bardo teachings in the Tibetan monastic tradition, just because this awareness is so important, and the connection to the preciousness of this moment, but also this larger life that we're just not awake to most of the time.
Callie, we're gonna have to have another show talking about the Bardo. Talking about the liminal realms of passage between one sphere of existence to another, and the reincarnation or the reigniting a sense of our passion and our life for the world. So that's going to be a whole other discussion.
And I guess that just is to say that that's the felt sense of the work that I'm inside of, that I bring to these women and their stories, is they're in this liminal. We work a lot with liminal space, and we work a lot in Bardo's space of becoming. And also letting go, but not having attachments to those old things. So I'd love a deeper discussion about the Bardo in the context of also what you've been through in your life, Keith.
Thank you, Callie. So this has been really such a pleasure. I can't believe that time has just sort of zoomed by, and it's been a lovely discussion with you. Is there, how do people get a hold of you, and how do they sort of do the work with you? How do they reach you, if you will? What's the best way to go about doing that?
The best way is to go through, you can go to my website. It's boldandvisible.com. There's right now I have I'm actually curating my 2022 cohorts, so you'll see there, you can go and look at the program, and we're just about, it's very carefully curated because we want to make sure everyone's ready to be in the process. I also have a workshop and story performance happening on October 9th. If you go to the website, there's a link you can register for free to come and join us.
Beautiful. So Callie B Elwaynes on LinkedIn, on the website, boldandvisible.com. And again, it's just such a magical opportunity to talk to you. I feel like there's so much more that we can explore, and we've really just hit the tip of the iceberg here. So thank you for opening it up and creating the space. And, I really look forward to having more discussions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kate. It's such a pleasure to be with you in your presence.
Thank you for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the interesting conversation and the insights from Callie B Elwaynes. I hope she also gave you some insights on how to be bold and visible in this world, and how to bring mindfulness experience into your life. As you look at your story, change your story and you'll change the world. Visit Callie at boldandvisible.com. We have other exciting guests coming up on the future, so follow the podcast, connect with us, leave us a review, and suggest topics that you'd like to hear. Connect with me, please, on social media, or visit my website, workmindfulness.com. Thank you again. See you on the next show. Take care. Bye-bye.